The promise that we have and the hope that we have is that Jesus is the resurrection and the life. Amen. And it's in John chapter 11 that we see the resurrection and the life in action. And the promise here is, though one might die, yet shall he live. Yet shall he live. All right. You guys awake tonight?
Yes.
All right. Very good. Well, let's look at the first few verses here. We're in John chapter 11, and this is from the English Standard Version.
John 11. Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. It was Mary who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was ill. So the sisters sent to him, saying,
Lord, he whom you love is ill.
But when Jesus heard it, he said,
This illness does not lead to death. It is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it.
Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Then after this, he said to the disciples,
Let us go to Judea again.
The disciples said to him,
Rabbi, the Jews were just now seeking to stone you, and are you going there again?
Jesus answered,
Are there not 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble, because he sees the light of this world. But if anyone walks in the night, he stumbles, because the light is not in him.
After saying these things, he said to them,
Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I go to awaken him.
The disciples said to him,
Lord, if he has fallen asleep, he will recover.
Now Jesus had spoken of his death, but they thought that he meant taking rest and sleep. Then Jesus told them plainly,
Lazarus has died, and for your sake I am glad that I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him.
So Thomas, called the twin, said to his fellow disciples,
Let us also go, that we may die with him.
And I'll stop right there. Lots going on here. They send word to Jesus, right? And Jesus, how do you think they sent this word to him? Were they text message? Somebody went. A messenger came. So when Jesus hears, and what did they want Jesus to do? What did they say? They sent word to him saying what?
Come.
Lazarus.
Come, and your love is sick.
Lord, behold, he whom you love is sick. See, when you're friends, there doesn't need to be a special request sometimes, right? It's assumed you're going to come and you're going to heal him. But what is Jesus' reply here? This sickness is not unto death, but for what?
Glory to God.
Have we heard that before?
Yes.
What chapter? It's not unto death. It's not unto death, but for the glory of God. Man born blind. Who sinned? Who said that? Susan? Yep. Chapter 9. Who sinned, him or his parents?
Neither.
No one. This is for the glory of God. Every opportunity or every challenge is an opportunity for what? The glory of God. So Jesus waited 2 extra days. He delayed. Why?
Test their faith.
God's glory. He waited 2 extra days. See, there was a Jewish understanding. It was for that, though, for those who didn't believe. Correct, because one of the day, many of the Jews believed that a person's soul and spirit remained with the dead body up to 3 days. So he's waiting a 4th day to say, it ain't an accident, guys. I am who I am. I am the resurrection and the life. So, when it comes to giving God glory, sometimes there are what? Delays. But the delay, now in mathematics, that's the equal sign with a line through it. Cassie knows about that, right? Which basically means no or not equal to. A delay is not a... What happens when God makes you wait? What do? Yeah. We stretch. What else do we do? Do we complain?
Yes. We have anxiety. We eventually surrender.
Yeah, eventually. Hopefully. Right? Do we grumble?
Yes.
Sometimes even stumble.
And sometimes we take matters into our own hands. Right? We get on that horse and we charge to the finish line.
We gotta get God.
But God's like, you forgot your saddle. You forgot to put your foot in the... Right? So we've got to be a people that say, hey, you know what? Whatever the delay is, it's going to be for God's glory. See, and that goes back to the song we were singing. I will live for you. It takes dying to self. Dying to the impulse. Dying to taking charge. Dying to whatever. Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that he was sick, he stayed 2 more days in the place where he was. And after this, he said to the disciples, let us go to Judea again. The disciples said to him, Rabbi, lately the Jews sought to stone you. Are you going there again? So what were they concerned about? They were concerned about his well-being.
Oh, his well-being.
Jesus' well-being. They were going to stone you. You're going to go there again? Jesus answered, are there not 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble, because he sees the light of this world. Who is the light of the world?
Jesus.
And when did he say that? Chapters 8 and 9. He's just reminding him again. So don't get mad when the preacher preaches the same thing. We're just reminding you what you know, but you need to know it. But if anyone walks in the night, he stumbles, because the light is not in him. These things he said, and after that he said to them, our friend Lazarus sleeps, but I go that I may wake him up. So what do you think the day meant? When he says, if anyone walks in the day, there's 12 hours in the day, right? What was he likening that to? What do you think? Himself. Specifically, what I believe is his earthly ministry. Because he's speaking in terms of hours here. We're going to see that toward the end, that his hour had not yet come. We learned that in chapter 2. We learned that in other places. So when he's talking about 12 hours, kind of like they're not 12 hours in a day. Yeah, there's a segment I'm going to be here, with you. The night, did it mean once Jesus left the earth we'd have no more light? So the night that he's referring to is the night of his passion, which would be which he said in the Gospels, the hour of darkness has come. It was that hour in which he would be betrayed, arrested, whipped, and crucified. Scourged, whipped, crucified. So that's the night of that. So now he says, I'm going because Lazarus sleeps, but I'm going to wake him up. His disciples said, Lord, if he sleeps, he will get well. They had a literal interpretation of the Bible, of the written word. What did Jesus mean by that he sleeps? That he died. See, why I want to highlight that is there are certain, you could call them cults, you could call them circles of organized religion that believe in what's called a soul sleep. That when you die, and they try to go to this verse to talk about the Seventh-day Adventist that I talked to. They believe in what's called a soul sleep. And he was trying to put that doctrine in me. And I said, no. I said, you got to read that again. Jesus told them plainly that the sleep meant he was dead. There's this soul sleep. And then I go into the other verses. To be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. When you die, your spirit is immediately out of that body. Ain't hanging around for 3 days. But in case you do, I'll raise Lazarus on the 4th day. But ain't going anywhere. But right to the judgment throne. I've spoken of this man's testimony many times. Dr. Richard Eby, if you ever look him up, his last name is spelled I-B-Y. Dr. Richard Eby was helping his daughter in his retired years from being a doctor. Falls off this balcony, and I think he split his head open, and they hooked up the EKG, and there kept being this little blip. And they were like, well, he's going to die. I mean, he's dead. But by law, we can't pronounce him dead until the blips go away, until he flatlines, basically, Well, not going into the whole testimony of this, but Dr. Richard Eby, he said, I listened to him on cassette tape, that's how long ago this was, but he said, the word immediate in the English language does not describe how quickly I was in the presence of the Lord Jesus Christ upon hitting the ground. And he said, he was asking Jesus all these questions. Now, if I'm not mistaken, he was a Jewish man who became a believer. Wow. And so he was a Messianic Jew, and he was asking the Lord all kinds of questions. And Jesus, not sarcastically, but just in all pureness, just said to him, didn't you read my book? Like, the answers are there. If you get in the book, you'll find the answers, So, but this man had a tremendous testimony of what his heaven looked like. Years later, again, I don't want to go off on a bunny trail, he went to the Holy Land with his wife. He goes into Lazarus' tomb. And over the years, there's lots of rubble on top of the tomb. So there's like a tiny staircase. Only 2-3 people max can go down at one time. And down in the tomb is like this light bulb hanging on a wire or whatever. At least at the time, that's how he had described it. When he went down there, the light bulb went out. The presence of the 2 people that he was with disappeared. And out of the tomb, or within the tomb, comes Jesus. And he said, the word beauty in the English language does not describe how glorious he is. And he said, then Jesus said, I showed you your heaven, now I must show you your hell. And he said, the word immediate does not describe how quickly I was in what he called the place of outer darkness. Jesus said in the Gospel, I think Matthew, Mark, and Luke, where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth, the place of outer darkness. He said it was like a cave where I couldn't stand up and I couldn't sit down. I was crouched. And he said from underneath me came 2 demons that had been assigned to me my entire life. And he said what killed me was at times they were referring to me as buddy. Because I had given in to their suggestions so many times that they looked at me like their buddy. And he said, I thought I was going to go insane. And he goes, and just about when I was about to go insane, I was back in the presence of Jesus in the tomb of Lazarus. And he said to me 3 times, tell them, tell them, tell them. This was never designed for them, but they will go there if they follow my adversary. Wow. So, you think Jesus knows something about the grave? Do you think he knows something about sleep and being dead and absent from the body is present with the Lord? Our friend Lazarus sleeps, but I go that I may wake him up. Lord, if he sleeps, he'll get well. Verse 13, Jesus spoke of his death, that they thought that he was speaking about taking rest and sleep. Then Jesus said to them plainly, Lazarus is dead, and I'm glad for your sakes that I was not there, that you may believe. Nevertheless, let us go to him. Thomas, who's called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, let us go that we may die with him. Now, I like this about Thomas because Thomas gets a bad rap. What is the adjective most often used in regard to Thomas? Doubting Thomas. Several people said that. Doubting Thomas. But here, I like Thomas's outlook. Not his outlook, but his loyalty. His devotion. We can call him Loyal Thomas. Lord, we'll go with you. You might die there, but guess what? I'm in. I'm in all the way. And I think that's the posture that we need to take. He wanted to see the nail holes. That's right. And that's why he's called Doubting Thomas. Because he didn't, you guys said you saw him, but I didn't. I didn't get a chance to put my hand in his side or in his hands and see the, But way before that, Thomas was a pretty loyal cat, wasn't he? And you know what? I've encouraged people with honest doubt. And I don't encourage people putting God to the test. But ask God for proofs. Ask God to reveal it. When people are, I don't know if I believe in God, isn't a bunch of stories, take him at his word. Take him at his word. At least I tell people, at least seek him enough to know who he is and what he said. And if you'll dare to believe, he'll show himself to you. It's impossible to please him without faith. Correct. But I think we've got to have a heart like Thomas that what? Stays loyal, no matter what it looks like. All right, let's pick up verse 17 now.
Now when Jesus came, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles off, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them concerning their brother. So when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him, but Mary remained seated in the house. Martha said to Jesus,
Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now, I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you.
Jesus said to her,
Your brother will rise again.
Martha said to him,
I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day.
Jesus said to her,
I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this?
She said to him,
Yes, Lord. I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is coming into the world.
She really didn't answer the question to me when I read that. He said to her, what? I'm the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he may die, yet he shall live. Whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is to come into the world. But do I, as the Christ, have the ability to make the dead live? I don't know if she believes that, though. Because of her answer. Or maybe she was declaring, well, you're the Christ, and of course you can. I don't know. But to me, she wasn't quite getting it. But let's scoot back to verse 17. So, when Jesus came, he found he'd already been in the tomb for 4 days. Why 4 days?
Jewish belief for 3 days.
Because of the Jewish belief, which we just talked about. No superstitions in the kingdom. I'll open up an umbrella indoors, I'll step on a crack, and I'll walk under a ladder. Amen. I don't live by superstitions and old wives' tales, and that's what Jesus was destroying here. It ain't about that, but if that's it, I'll trump that too. Crush his superstitions. Right? He is the resurrection of the life. There is no denying that. What I like here, many of the Jews had joined the women, came to console Martha, Mary to comfort them. Martha, as soon as she heard that Jesus was coming, went and met him. I don't know how far away he was, but when she knew he was coming, she went. But Mary, where was Mary? Sitting in the house. Now Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you'd been here, my brother would not have died. Kind of complaining. Kind of putting the old Italian guilt trip on Jesus. If you'd only been here, he wouldn't have died. Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you'd been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. See, Martha continued to look up. Even though Jesus was tardy to the situation, even though he didn't come at the time that she would have preferred, she still went out to meet him. And then she says, though you were late, in not so many words, I know that if you ask God now, he'll still do something. And that's where we got to be. That's waiting on the Lord. Waiting on the Lord isn't giving up. It isn't running to, the prayer meeting that's really a gossip session with no prayer at all.
Oh, amen.
Right? We've got to be people that say, you know what, God? I thought you'd have come by now. But you're going to come. The glory of God's going to be revealed. Things are going to change. See, that's a spirit of faith. Waiting doesn't mean it's praying, it's believing, it's not living in denial. It's still searching him, it's still praying, it's seeking, it's fasting, it's hungering for him to come. It's believing. Martha said, I know he'll rise, resurrection, last day. I am the resurrection and the life. That's who he is. Who but God could say that? Right? Who but God in the flesh could say, I am the resurrection and the life? And he who believes in me, though he were dead, yet he will live. Who could say that? See, the Jehovah's Witnesses would tell you that Jesus was just a perfect man, that he wasn't God. And we know better from John's Gospel, right? The Mormons would say, well, Jesus is Lord, but only of this planet. But when you go and you die, you get a planet of your own, and Joe gets a planet of his own, and Mike gets a planet of his own. And no, Jesus is Lord, period. He is Lord, and he is Christ. Let's keep reading here.
She went and called her sister Mary, saying in private,
the teacher is here and is calling for you.
And when she heard it, she rose quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet come into the village.
Now let me ask you a question before we keep going on. When did Jesus call for Mary? It's not recorded that Jesus called for Mary. Remember, Martha went out to him. See, and this is why I tend to lean that when she answers in verse 26, when he says, whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? Oh, yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is to come into the world. And when she had said these things, she went her way secretly and called Mary. The teacher has come and is calling for you. He never called for Mary.
No.
He said, I'm the resurrection and the life.
She wanted to know that. She wanted to share that with her sister.
What did she want to share?
Jesus being there. The teacher is here.
All right?
She didn't want her to miss.
She didn't want her to miss out on Jesus. Okay.
Yeah,
The teacher is coming, is calling for you. Let's keep reading.
but was still in the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who were with her in the house, consoling her, saw Mary rise quickly and go out, they followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to weep there. Now when Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet, saying to him,
Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died.
Does that sound familiar? Both women were focused on if Jesus would have just been here, he could have healed the sick. Could he raise the dead?
yeah.
Well, we know that.
But they didn't.
I don't know if they believed that.
Because maybe they've never seen it.
Exactly. And that speaks to where we are sometimes today. If we don't see it,
We don't believe
we don't believe it.
Exactly.
You know? Some people say, well, I've never seen God, so I don't believe in God. My answer is, have you ever seen your brain? But you believe you have one,
Yeah.
because there's evidence that you think, right? I like what Billy Graham says. Have you seen God? Have you ever seen him? I've never seen the wind. I feel the effects of the wind, but I've never seen the wind. You might not see him with the physical eye, but he's in your midst. And you see the way he moves. In your own life, you can look back and go, how could there not be a God? How could there not be a God? I don't have to prove to an atheist that there is a God. You're going to prove to me that there isn't one. Why are you putting the onus on me? It's pretty evident to me that there's a God. From a so-called explosion that you say happened billions of years ago, well, there's a lot of order in the earth, a lot of order in the universe. All these planets go around the sun perfectly. They don't crash into each other. They stay on an orbit perfectly around the sun. Whoa, if the world was one shade closer to the sun, there would be no earth, it would burn up. If it was 1 degree further from the sun, there'd be no life because it would freeze to death. It would be too cold. And yet, for all these billions upon billions of years, the earth has stayed perfectly on that orbit around the sun. All from an accident. Go and blow up an old junkyard and see if you get, when all the pieces land, a Mercedes running. All you're going to do is get in the car and drive. From this explosion, we have a perfect earth that runs itself, spins, is tilted at a perfect angle for the sunlight to give life to the planet. It goes around.
That's all God's creation.
It is. So just because you haven't seen him doesn't mean he doesn't exist. And Jesus is the exact representation of the invisible God.
When Jesus saw her weeping,
Verse 33.
the Jews who had come with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in his spirit and greatly troubled. And he said,
Where have you laid him?
They said to him,
Lord, come and see.
Jesus wept. So the Jews said,
See how he loved him.
but some of them said,
Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man also have kept this man from dying?
Wow. We'll stop right there for a minute. So these people went out to what? Comfort Mary, supposing she was going to the grave to weep, right? When she gets there, they're all gathered around. She had fallen down at his feet. Lord, if you'd been here, my brother would not have died. Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her weeping. He groaned in the spirit and was troubled. I got a horse's head here, because the word groaned is a Greek word. The word for groan in the Greek means the snorting of a horse and an indignation. At the sound of their weeping, Jesus groaned, not literally with the snorting of a horse, but in the spirit of, it's wartime. Jesus' mission in this world was to conquer death. He would conquer it by first dying himself. But here he was having a head-on-head collision with the life of Lazarus. And now he was getting ready for battle. See, they were sad, but he was angry. He's angry at the opposition of death. Death is man's enemy, and that's who Jesus came to conquer. But the sadness represented man's what? Starting with a U. Unbelief. Jesus came in his anger to conquer man's enemy, which is death. But the reason the people were sad was because of man's unbelief. They were weeping, they were sad.
They were without hope.
They were without hope. Whether Jesus raises somebody in the physical or whether he allows them to die, he is still the author of life. And he's still the resurrection and the life. And still, if you believe in him, though you were dead, yet shall you live. And that's why a Christian memorial is so much different from the Jewish memorials I've been to, even some of the memorials that I've been to, and some of just non-believers, because they have no hope. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 says, we are not of those who have no hope. We don't grieve as the world does. Why? We have the resurrection and the life. Shortest verse in the Bible, John 11:35, Jesus wept. And this contrasts what the pagan gods and the Greek gods were all about. They were very impersonal, very disconnected. Here, the living God comes in the person of Christ and weeps with the, what do they call it? The empathy of connecting with his own. Here they are weeping. He wept with them. Some theologians believe he wept because of their unbelief. But nonetheless, he wept, and he is connecting with his people either way. And he says what? What's that? All right, let's keep going here. Almost done.
Jesus, deeply moved again, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone lay against it. Jesus said,
"Take away the stone."
Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him,
Lord, by this time there will be an odor, for he has been dead 4 days.
Jesus said to her,
Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?
So they took away the stone. And Jesus lifted up his eyes and said,
Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me. But I said this on account of the people standing around, that they may believe that you sent me.
When he had said these things, he cried out with a loud voice,
Lazarus, come out!
The man who had died came out, his hands and feet bound with linen strips, and his face wrapped with a cloth. Jesus said to them,
Unbind him and let him go.
I love that. Because in a spiritual sense, we have the call to call people out of their spiritual death. And when they come out, unbind them. You know, Dave's testified about his bout with alcohol, right? Jesus unbound you, right? If I go around this room, many people would say, yeah, before I knew Jesus, my life was this way, and now I'm free. Or I'm ahead of the game. Maybe you're in the process of becoming free of something, but surely you've come a long way out of it, and you're almost to that finish line in the natural. In the spirit, it's done, but you're walking it out and dying to it day by day. Make sense? But here, let's touch on some points. If you believe in me, you will see the glory of God, right? Someone go to Romans 4:17 real quick. Someone go to Romans 4:17. It goes back to this, though. You will see the glory. Go ahead, Suzanne, nice and loud.
As it is written, I have made you a father of many nations. He is our Father in the sight of God, in whom we believe. The God who gives life to the dead and calls things that are not as though they were.
Bam. The God who raises the dead and calls things that are not as though they were. What did Jesus do at that tomb? Lazarus, come forth. As though he was alive. Just come on out. I'll tell you, I was praying for Stephen in the hospital. I know you had mentioned that you were there that day as well, and praying, and Gail similarly was hitting him or talking to him, and I was bumping him in the arm, like, come on, Stephen, come on out of here, and because I believe in a God that calls things that are not as though they were, and that's how we've got to pray. Jesus said, act like it's already happened and God will give it to you. And that's why I said the previous Sunday, we never pray, Lord, if it be your will, heal our sister or our brother. Don't ever pray that. As far as I'm concerned, it's His will to heal. If I've prayed in faith and nothing has happened and the person's on their deathbed, my prayer might change to, Lord, if you're not going to heal them, then just take them home and don't let them suffer anymore. That's the only time I'll pray, but it's still a faith prayer. I'm still believing. If you're not going to heal, because I'm trusting you are. We want to stay in a posture of this horse, groaning and contending, snorting, contending for faith, contending for life, contending for health, contending for revival. Does that make sense? There were two reactions when Jesus raised the dead. I'll read through these real quick. Many of the Jews who had come to Mary and had seen the things Jesus did believed in him. But, there's the big but. But some of them went away to the Pharisees and told them the things Jesus did. Then the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered a council and said, what shall we do? For this man works many signs. If we let him alone like this, everyone will believe in him. And the Romans will come and take away both our place and nation. Did Jesus ever want to do that? It was their own fear, their own paranoia, that if people believed in him, that the Romans would come and think A, B, C, and D. Just walk by truth. You start thinking, the government's going to do this, or so-and-so is going to do that, or you're getting yourself into a web sometimes of, we can't, then you're fighting battles that don't need to be fought. Who's been there? Yeah. I have.
All of us.
Right? Because you thought, or you presumed, it was your fear, ultimately. Little fears, big fears. They had a big fear. The Romans were going to come. But sometimes my insecurities have gotten me in trouble. Right? My doubts. My misinterpretations. Sometimes it was because I miscommunicated something. And when somebody responded back, I thought I said one thing, and then I'm like, oh no, I did say that. I'm an idiot. Lots of battles we don't have to fight. But what are the two things? One, when Jesus moves, it's going to do what? Produce faith. And the other is an O word. opposition. It's going to create opposition. Faith in the believer, and with that faith comes obedience, but opposition to the one who does not believe. They oppose the things of Jesus. Have you ever shared a testimony of Christ and someone not receive it?
Yeah.
They give something else credit.
Yes.
Oh, it's the power of the mind.
Coincidence.
It's a coincidence.
They were coming anyway.
Oh, the power of prayer. Do not, I've told people, don't patronize me with that. I've told them straight out. I say, it's the power of prayer when you're praying to the one who answers prayer. And there is one who answers prayer. It's not just this mystical power of prayer. It's a God who rose from the dead who answers prayer. Can I get a good amen?
Amen.
Amen. All right. Very good. All right. And then he keeps going here into now this he did not say in his own authority, but being the high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus would die for the nation. Imagine that. God prophesied through the high priest. Not for that nation only, but also that he would gather together in one the children of God who were scattered abroad. Then from that day on, they plotted to put him to death. Therefore Jesus no longer walked openly among the Jews, but went from there into the country near the wilderness to a city called Ephraim, and there remained with his disciples. Jesus did not do this because he was afraid. Why Jesus did it was simply because his hour had not yet come. We won't have to go there. We're kind of going over on time. But John 7:30 talks to that issue. It wasn't his time yet. John chapter 2, it wasn't his time yet, he said. His hour had not yet come. So now, if you read through that, 55 through 57, the Passover of the Jews was near, so on and so forth. 56, they sought Jesus, spoke among themselves, stood in the temple. What do you think? That he will not come to the feast? Now both the chief priests and the Pharisees had given command that if anyone knew where he was, he should report it, that they might seize him. So again, the plot to kill him was thickening and thickening and thickening, and now was this opportunity when the feast came that they might pinpoint and do that. But as we reflect on this chapter, who is Jesus? Somebody.
The light of the world.
The light of the world and the resurrection and the life. He's the one who calls people out of the grave, out of the tomb. And he unbinds them, he loosens them. From this chapter, what does he want from you?
Belief.
Ding, 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 ding. Believe. Believe on him. We talked about in an earlier chapter. This is the work of God, to believe on the one whom he sent. Right? What does the Father want you to do? Believe on Jesus. What does Jesus want you to do? Believe on him. That you might believe in, because he and the Father are one. There it is. Let's pray.
Amen.